Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to talk about Batman New Gotham Volume 2. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're going to be reviewing Batman New Gotham. This is Volume 2. I have reviews of Volume 1 up on the channel already, so if you haven't watched that, maybe watch that and get a little bit of background. But again, this is Greg Rucka, Sean Martinborough, and Rick Burchett doing the art here, and this is the run of Detective Comics before, post No Man's Land. Gotham is being rebuilt, that whole thing, although there's a whole lot less of it in this volume than there was in the first one, and even the first volume didn't have that much. So why they're calling it still New Gotham instead of just Detective Comics by Greg Rucka Volume 2, I have no idea. We're still doing the thing with Sean Martinborough where we're taking the color scheme and kind of changing the key color every time there's a new storyline. So this one is yellow, and that lasts a couple issues. This one's kind of a green or gray tone. There's 2 issues in here in the front with Superman. That's a red, kind of a red and blue, if you would, and black. And there's a green one here in the middle. So each one kind of indicates a different story, although there's not an overall story that we're fighting in this one the way that in Volume 1 you had this initial Vesper Lynn character who then disappeared in the middle of that first volume and then came around back at the end. This one is more about the point of view character in here is not Batman. It's more of, I want to call her Stephanie Brown because her costume reminds me so much of Spoiler. But it is Sasha Bordeaux, who we will later know in the OMAC project and become head of Checkmate, that kind of thing. But she was introduced here, or at the end of the last volume. But it's really this one that she kind of takes hold. I did a review for Officer Down, which is the crossover that happens in between these 2 volumes. And I was remarking in that video, it's weird that it's not collected in here. I know it doesn't flow art-wise because it totally does not have the 2-color scheme in that entire crossover. But it's definitely required reading, I guess. I mean, there is a little blurb in the front of the book where they talk about Gordon getting shot and retiring. But there's a moment here at the end where Harvey Dent is looking at the handcuff keys, which was the major thrust of the first and last issue of that Officer Down crossover. And if you haven't read that, you're not going to get the weight of what that handcuff key means to Harvey or the other detectives in the Gotham City Police Department. So I feel like that's definitely required reading just for that moment, because when you get to that callback in here, it's definitely a gut punch, ooh, oh man. And there's a whole bunch of stuff at the end where IAB is investigating the guy that shot Gordon, all of a sudden disappears, and they're investigating all that stuff. So there's a couple issues that revolve around that entire storyline, and for it not to have been collected in the last, 20 years is kind of a weird thing to see. So not quite sure what's going on or why that wasn't included, but I do feel like it is kind of necessary to understand what's going on in this volume. This is definitely Sasha Bordeaux's tale. She figures out that Bruce Wayne is Batman in the first issue, and then there's a 2-part crossover with Superman, which I kind of could have done without. Although plus side, it is Ed McGuinness on art when he was on Superman with Jeff Loeb in the late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of thing. President Luthor is here. Lex Luthor became president in the Superman titles around that time. So we're definitely exploring the idea of breaking into the White House because Luthor has a kryptonite ring and we're going to steal it back. So it's more of a Superman plot than it is a Batman plot. And you definitely lose the whole storyline of Sasha Bordeaux figuring out that Bruce is Batman for 2 issues while we go on this little jaunt to Metropolis in Washington, D.C. with Superman, although we do get straight back to it later on. There was this issue here where, this green one where Batman is he's going after some thugs, and he kind of missed that these thugs knocked a car off into the river and kind of shows up in the nick of time. So that was a little bit interesting, but as soon as that issue's over, we're straight back to the Gotham City Police Department. being like half of our characters, as well as Bruce and Sasha. And I would say that Sasha, Crispus, Allen, and Montoya are definitely more of a main character than Batman is in this storyline. So to call it, I guess to call it New Gotham in big bold print is way more representative of the storyline than it is to say Batman in big bold print on the front cover. So if you're thinking you're going to get a bunch of Batman stories, you are, but they're not really focused on Batman. This isn't Batman Hush or Court of Owls or anything like that. This is more focused on the detectives. And it's really kind of a primer for that Gotham Central series that came out a little bit later on. I think it came out after Bruce Wayne Fugitive and stuff like that. So, and that lasted for 40 issues. It's a fantastic series. If you haven't read that, go and check that out for sure. But, the little stories in here were fun, but I do think knowing what comes after this with Sasha, it's kind of a weird thing to have her introduced at the end of the first volume and be the main character in here, and then all of a sudden whatever happens to her at Bruce Wayne Murderer and Fugitive seems really sudden. You're not really getting to know Sasha at all. She's just kind of this one-dimensional character that's Bruce's bodyguard, and she's just trying to keep up with Batman because her job is to protect Bruce. And so a lot of her internal monologue is talking about that dichotomy, as opposed to thinking about like, why is he doing this, or this is crazy, or just the normal things a rational human being would think of if you determined that your boss was Batman, right? She's just kind of like, my boss is Batman. All right, well, I guess I still have to do my job, so I might as well train as a superhero and let him, punish me and train me and stuff, so I can put on a costume and a mask just to follow him around so I can still do my job. Like, it's kind of a strange thing when you think about it, how there's not a real like reaction issue of, is this even right? Like, do I support him being Batman and being a vigilante, beating the crap out of people? Should I report him to the police? Like, none of that conversation happens in this book at all. It's just like, it felt like it was a setup to have her be the character she is in Bruce Wayne Murderer and Fugitive, as opposed to a real fleshed out character. I mean, yeah, later on, OMAC Project comes around and Checkmate, when Greg Rucka's writing that, she is more fleshed out here, but it's definitely more of a plot device, I think, here of setup in terms of what happens to her in the next big crossover than her being a character in her own right here. So, anyway, do I think it's worth reading? I don't really think so. Again, I think I felt this way a little bit with the first volume. Like, there's nothing here to grab onto that says this is a definitive Batman story or anything like that. So I do think that there's fun to be had here, but it's not essential reading. I think you could jump from, if you're just reading the crossovers, you could jump from No Man's Land straight to Bruce Wayne Murderer and have no issues whatsoever in terms of just figuring out like, oh, Sasha's his bodyguard. They kind of explain it right away. The other thing that is here that's also more set up for that first crossover is Vesper Fairchild, who is the person that kind of gets the axe in the first issue of that murderer storyline, if you catch my drift. So there is a couple issues here setting up that her and Bruce are dating, but they're kind of done at the end of the book, so it's kind of a weird jump to have what happens to her in that first issue. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. It's just kind of weird. So I'm going to read the Brubaker trade next up in my Batman series and see if that has more tie-ins to that crossover, more setup. Maybe Vesper Fairchild has a bigger part there to play as well. But if it's only this book, I'm kind of like, man, that's kind of a weird direction to take everything with these two characters. So I don't know. There you have it. The art is beautiful, though. If you like Sean Martinborough, if you like his stuff, if you like this kind of two-tone color scheme with the stories, it is a very cool look, like I said in the last video. But the story is just not essential. So if you find it for cheap, I would say pick it up. But I don't think you should go seek this out to fill your run or anything like that the way I did. It looks nice on the shelf, but it's not essential reading for Batman fans. So there you have it, folks. So let me know what you think of Batman New Gotham down below in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.